It began with the wind, not the loud kind that howls down mountain passes or lifts thatched roofs from barns. No, this wind whispered. It slipped between the reeds and curled under doorways like a question no one wanted to answer. In the village of Tyros, nestled deep in a quiet cradle of hills, people lived by the rhythm of the soil. They farmed, they fetched water, they argued over goats. But now the wind had changed, and though no one could say why, they began listening differently. Old women stirred soup more slowly. Men looked over their shoulders on the walk back from the fields. Children hushed their games when the sky grew pink. Whispers carried stories. Stories carried tension. And tension, like seeds, always finds a place to grow. For generations, Tyros welcomed traders who smelled of spice and wore sandals with soles hardened by hundreds of roads. They came with obsidian, lapis lazuli, and jars of honey thick as syrup. But one day, the traders arrived with nothing but silence. No jokes, no tales of cities beyond the dunes. Just furrowed brows and glances cast behind them. When asked, they only muttered about burned fields, broken gates, and vanished villages. Places far enough to not cause panic, but close enough to make the skin crawl. One trader, a man with a feather in his beard, whispered, "They're fortifying in the east." No one asked who they were, but the seed was planted. Tyros wasn't the kind of place where things disappeared. Every person knew every goat by name, every shadow by its shape. But one morning, Mina's youngest goat, the white one with the twisted horn, was gone. Tracks led to the tree line but stopped in a place where the grass was flat and wide. A boy named Pelos claimed he saw strangers. Tall like gods, but dirty like thieves, he said. One had a knife made of shiny bronze. Most dismissed it as a dream, a child's story. But when Pelos' voice cracked with fear, the elders called for a village meeting. They gathered beneath the fig tree, where judgment was given and bread was broken. And after hours of muttering and worried stares, they agreed on one thing. Something needed to be built. They began the next morning, hands still aching from yesterday's work, hearts not yet ready for tomorrow's fears. They gathered stones from the riverbank, round, flat ones first, then jagged rocks that bit the palms. No one was a mason, but they became one. No one was a planner, but fear is a blueprint that writes itself. The wall started as a thought, then it became a line in the dirt, then a ridge of stone, then a promise. They didn't talk about what it would keep out. They just built. The sound of hammering replaced birdsong. The children stopped singing. Meals grew simpler. More time went into stacking than stirring. Still, no enemies came, but they kept building. Because sometimes the absence of danger is the most dangerous thing of all. It was one thing to pile stones, but walls need depth as well as height. So they began to dig. They dug by moonlight. It started with the young men, eager to prove strength beneath a sky full of stars. Then the older men joined, knees cracking, backs tight, but hearts steady. By the third night, the women came, too. Shovels in calloused hands, babies tied to their backs. Even the children helped, carrying dirt in woven baskets or fetching water from the stream. No one told them to hurry, yet everyone moved as if chased by a shadow. The trench ran along the edge of the village like a moat without water. It grew deeper each night. Some said it would slow attackers. Others just wanted something to do with their fear. Above the trench, the wall rose, a little higher each day. It was thick, uneven, ugly in places, but the wall stood, and the villagers gave it a name, Bros. It meant we do not run. The word came from the old tongue, one barely remembered except in songs and carvings. It was the kind of name a stone would like, short, firm, and shaped like a fist. Now, when they lifted the next boulder, they said the name like a chant. Vros, they whispered. Vros, they breathed. With each repetition, the fear seemed to bend. Not vanish, not yield, but soften around the edges. The wall was no longer just rock. It was memory. It was shield. It was hope. Before the wall, food was kept in baskets and buried pits outside the village. Safe from the pigs, safe from the rain. But now the grain was moved inside. The wall, though unfinished, had begun to enclose their lives. First the people, then the goats, then the grain. Men carried sacks of barley over their shoulders like wounded soldiers. Women gathered figs into their skirts. The smell of wheat and olives filled the narrow paths between houses. Rats came, too, but even that was better than the idea of strangers eating what they had grown. They built small wooden gates into the wall, enough for a person to pass, if crouching. And each was guarded, even at night. There had never been guards in Tyros before. Now there were shifts, watches, passwords, and the wall watched them all. It happened on the 14th night of construction. The sky was a blanket of smoke-colored clouds, and dinner had been unusually quiet. Then a figure appeared at the southern path, staggering, arms black with soot, eyes wide like those of a hunted deer. It was Damos, a trader who once brought honey dates and copper combs. Now his cart was gone, his wares forgotten. He told a story. A village to the southeast, larger than Tyros, with strong young fighters and stone homes, had been reduced to ash. They came before dawn, he whispered. No banner, no words, just bronze and fire. He paused and looked at their wall. They didn't have one of these, he added, almost to himself. The villagers offered him water and a place to sleep, but no one else rested that night. The next morning, construction doubled. A week passed. Then came the night of the horn. It was distant, maybe from the east, maybe the north. A long, low note that didn't sound like an animal or any call they knew. The kind of sound that curls around your bones. People froze. Mothers pressed their children close. Men reached for spears that had never seen battle. Some climbed halfway up the wall to peer into darkness. But nothing came. No marching feet. No flame. Just silence. And yet no one slept. In the morning, they added stones higher than before. One woman, Elira. Even the lids were heavier now, fitted tight, sealed with wax. No one wanted even a mouse sneaking in. The potter, Nomi, once known for joyful shapes, now made urns with jagged rims. She said they were for ashes, but didn't say whose. And still, no enemy came. But the silence between days stretched longer. The wind still whispered, and the wall still grew. The children of Tyros no longer played chase. They played siege. They built small walls from mud bricks and threw figs at each other, pretending they were stones. They took turns being invaders and defenders. Everyone wanted to be the wall. One child, little Menes, made a helmet from a pot and declared himself Captain Vros. The others followed him up and down the dirt paths, calling out plans to defend imaginary gates. The adults watched with a mix of pride and sadness. The wall had entered the games now, but it had also entered the children's minds. They no longer feared the dark. They feared what might be hidden beyond the wall. They thought he was a ghost at first. He wore the same cloak, though it now hung in tatters. The same rings, though one finger was missing. He had walked for 6 days without food, guided by nothing but fading memory and a trail of distant smoke. His name was Callum, once a trader of fine wool and red glass beads. He had left months ago, seeking goods in the north. He returned with nothing. No wagon, no horses, just a tale. The roads are broken, he rasped. The cities, Amura, Dishet, even the hill forts, gone or closed. He held out a single object, a wooden spoon, carved with a mother bird feeding her chicks. I traded it for a loaf of barley bread, he said. It was the only thing left in the market. They let him stay, but that night, the villagers closed the gates earlier than usual. By now, the wall encircled everything, people, food, fears, but still it wasn't enough. One night, during a particularly still dusk, the priestess Inari stood atop the gate tower and whispered, "We have sealed the ground. Now we must speak to the sky." The others didn't laugh. Instead, they lit a fire in the central square, piled herbs and bone fragments, and burned incense until the air danced with silver smoke. They sang old songs, not for the gods of the harvest, but for the gods of stone, fear, and fire. Names whispered rather than spoken. A ritual was born that night, not because they believed it would stop the unseen enemy, but because they believed in doing something. anything that felt like control, even if it meant fortifying the wind. On the 28th day since the wall had closed, rain fell. Not a drizzle, but a storm, steady and soaking, the kind that paints the earth into puddles and swells the river beyond its banks. But no one cursed it. No one ran for shelter. Instead, they stood beneath it and lifted their arms. The wall, dark with moisture, looked softer. The mud trenches softened. Children jumped into puddles. A goat bleated from a rooftop. It was the first night they didn't post extra guards. No fire was seen on the horizon. No horn was heard. And in the morning, Elira smiled. "I think the wall likes the rain," she said. It was elder to men, bent by time and blind in one eye, who finally spoke what many had only whispered inside their heads. He sat on a stool in the square, pipe smoke curling like ivy through the air. "You know," he said softly, "we used to sleep with the doors open. We used to leave bread on doorsteps, not locks." A few nodded. One woman began to cry. He continued, "The world used to feel bigger. Now it feels like a box." No one interrupted, because they remembered. They remembered the laughter from the harvest festival, the smell of spice cakes at weddings, the thrill of watching fireflies over the fields. Before the wall, before Vros, before they believed in danger more than they believed in each other, came during twilight, not the full dark of night, but that strange hour when the light goes pale and blue and shadows stretch like fingers across the land. The horn returned, long and low, just as before, but this time closer. The villagers stood frozen. No one cried out. No one ran. They only listened. Came again. A second call. Deeper, like a warning carved into wind. Then silence. Men scrambled to the wall's highest points. Eyes scanned the fields, the woods, the far hills, but saw nothing. Just empty paths. Just swaying trees. Still, the silence now felt thick, like something breathing just beyond the line of sight. They lit fires that night, not for warmth, but to push back the dark. Some sharpened their blades. Others whispered prayers to gods who had long been ignored. And yet, nothing came. Dawn rose gently, as if nothing had happened. But from that day on, they doubled the watch. No one ventured outside. Even the goats were restless. The horn had returned. And though unseen, something was out there. Days passed, then weeks. The horn didn't come again. No soldiers appeared. No riders on horseback. No smoke on the horizon. Just quiet. Not peaceful, but eerie, stretched too long like the pause before a storm. The wall stood, now complete, thicker in places than even planned, almost too thick for sound to pass through. Inside, life resumed its shape. Not normal, not joyous, but steady. Meals were shared, though smaller. Songs were hummed, though softer. People worked, though their eyes were always tilted toward the gate. Some began to wonder. Had the enemy passed them by? Had Vros worked? One morning, young Menes asked aloud, "What if no one was ever coming?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a damp fire. No one answered, but no one told him he was wrong. A year passed. The wall remained, not just intact, but growing. Though there were no new attacks, no new threats, still they added to it. New layers, watchtowers, stone reinforcements. They widened the trench, built secondary gates. Some families even constructed inner walls inside their homes, partitions meant for hiding, should anything ever breach the first defense. The wall had become more than protection. It had become tradition. Boys learned to build before they learned to write. Girls memorized guard patterns as easily as lullabies. When children played now, they didn't pretend to be kings or travelers. They pretended to be stone. People rarely left the village. When they did, it was quick, cautious, and with guards. The road became dusted over. Weeds crept in. And the world beyond the wall became a legend. Years later, Vros was no longer just the name of the wall. It was the name of the village. Children born after the wall knew no other world. No fields without fences. No nights without gates. They never saw the road, or the wide horizon, or the river that once fed the old path. They only knew stone. Stone beneath their feet, stone in their stories, stone in their minds. Elder Temen passed quietly in his sleep, buried in a chamber beneath the eastern tower. His last words were soft. "Let the wall remember me." They carved his name into a slab, set it into the gate's arch. Visitors stopped coming long ago. Traders stopped appearing. Letters from distant places stopped arriving. But the people of Rose did not miss them. They had their wall. They had their safety. And slowly, without knowing, they had become the very thing they built.